I'm here this morning with Dr. Vicky Taylor and Sarah, who's the Superintendent Pharmacist at White Pharmacy. And I want to talk a bit about the way in which we work. And it's important to understand that although we call ourselves White Pharmacy, there's much, much more to it than that. It is very much a doctor-led service, and the way in which we operate depends very firmly upon the doctors and their input. And I'd like to start off the discussion by asking Dr. Taylor, what are the main differences between when you're in general practice and having a consultation face-to-face there and the online type of consultation that you get at White Pharmacy?
Absolutely. There's a huge difference. When I'm in my GP practice, I have got the patient in front of me, usually. I've got their full medical records on the computer and access to all the lab results, consultant letters that have come about them, and their full list of medical history, allergies. So I've got all the information there in front of me. When I'm working for White Pharmacy, I am entirely reliant on the patient's account. So all the information that is in there that they have submitted is absolutely essential to me. So it's really important that it's current, up to date, as accurate and as full as possible. I need the patient to talk to me as if we were having a face-to-face conversation. So I need to know what sort of impact it's having on their life. I need to know what their mood is like. There's so much that I can't ask them face-to-face, so it needs to come across in the questionnaire.
Okay, and Sarah, from the White Pharmacy point of view, how do we go about ensuring that we get sufficient information so that Dr. Taylor feels that the prescription she's going to write is safe and appropriate for the patient?
Well, we just realised in the past that people populate their questionnaires quite sparsely, and we weren't getting that much information from them. So this involved the people in my department, the clinical department, to send emails out to patients or phone calls or a combination of both to get that information. We also have an example questionnaire up there that people can read. It's still a struggle though. It's still been very, very difficult to make people understand. So what we do is we say, can you imagine that you're seeing a locum in your GP practice? What would you start saying? And I think that's a very good place to start, isn't it? Sort of imagine that. Because I expect even as a locum, it's very difficult to walk into a practice and just...
so you start from scratch.
Yeah, and you don't know the family history or the social context, nothing. So yeah, there's a lot of emails and a lot of phone calls, but if the patient had already filled those the answers to those questions off as fully as possible beforehand, that would have saved some of that interaction. Yeah.
Okay, so we rely on the patient being straight with us and honest to make sure that we've got that information. And what do we do if they don't supply that type of information that we require? What happens then?
First, we help them to find it. I think you do mention being honest and straight. Sometimes the patient might have access to letters, they may have access to information, but they don't realise it's relevant. So many times people during a conversation have said to me, well I see the doctor because I have epilepsy, and I'll say, in fact it's a very common one, and I'll say, well that's not in the questionnaire, and they say, well it's not related to my pain. So it's actually about increasing that contact time you have with the patient and really drawing out that information. And then again, as you say, sometimes they just generally will not have letters. So what we do in that case is we might have to say, considering the dosage you're on, considering the length of time you've been on this product, it's no longer safe for us to prescribe without that information. So we might have to stop it or reduce the dosage.
But that information, for example, might well be available from the GP. Now, my understanding is that a patient can ask their GP for any information at all that's on file.
Yes, that's right.
And that should be freely given. And the information then can be sent by the patient to us. And would that satisfy that situation. So let me ask you first, is that the case?
Absolutely, it is, and I think very much we have to be fair to busy GPs here, that patients aren't always copied in on their hospital letters. So if you are making a request to a GP, make sure you allow time to get the document from them. There may be a copying charge, so although you have the right to that information, you don't have the right to it for free. So there may be an associated charge. Don't go asking for it the day before you do your prescription from White Pharmacy, because there is a turnaround time for these things. But yes, you should be able to access this information from your GP and send it in to us securely, either by scanning it in or photographing it. I think the point I want to make is that we're not being difficult here at White Pharmacy. We're not being nosy. We're not being obstructive. We're being safe and thorough and efficient, and I think that's what puts us head and shoulders above other online pharmacies, that we're being as safe and secure as we possibly can.
So, Sarah, can you just take us through very briefly the process that happens when a new patient, for example, registers and signs up with White Pharmacy?
Yes, of course. So when they place their order, what would happen is the pharmacist who is on duty will phone that patient, and every first patient gets called. And that's sort of like the hello that you would get when a GP lets a patient in for the first time. And we sort of just get to know each other. And the reason for that is online pharmacy is very new. People don't really know how it works, and it's evolving all the time. And what we want to ensure is that the patient knows that we are real people, we are working here in Surrey, which I think adds to the whole safety. You feel quite safe that these people have been through the NHS system. We do know how it all works, and also they can ring us at any time at all, or they can email us, and we would be happy to explain a little bit more about it. So then after that conversation, all those notes get written into the patient notes, which are all kept together, so that every questionnaire they ever do with their lifetime with us and how that changes, that's all kept in their account. Any transcripts of conversations over the phone, that's kept in there as well, and any communication between the doctors and the pharmacists or reception or the dispensers, it's all in there. And I know sometimes people say, well, I spoke to so-and-so and they said this, and I'll say, well, I can see what was said. And we can also have the facility to add telephone calls to there. We record all our phone calls, and if there's one that we think is particularly significant, they go in there as well. And the letters that you were talking about earlier and the documents, they all get uploaded onto that account. So am I right in thinking that's pretty much how things are done?
That's very much like a GP medical
practice, yeah, and we have tried to replicate that.
In fact, I would say it's probably more than a GP medical record, because we don't record telephone consultations. We will make a note of what was said, but a lot of what you do here is actually more than you would get in NHS general practice. And
I think that does reflect the fact that we know we have limitations, we know we don't have access to all the lab reports that you were talking about before, and we don't have that patient in front of us, we don't know who their parents are when the children aren't, all that sort of thing. So that's why we need to do that extra bit more.
Yes.
And I mean, to be fair, patients do sometimes say, this is hard work. Well, it's kind of meant to be, but the more that the patient understands how we work and why we're doing it, and that we're doing it with the best intentions, I think that makes them happier to do it.
Yes, that's certainly, if you look at the Trustpilot reviews, which are independently posted by patients who have used the White Pharmacy service, you can see there the evidence that this process actually is worthwhile, because a lot of the people are saying that the safety aspect of what we do is very important, and they're quite happy to go through this process. But they don't have to go through this process every time. This is when they register for the first time. Is that correct?
Yes, and they order, or if they change their drug, if they've been having one thing for some time, then they switch. We will have another chat with them. And something I'll just say which makes us different to, I think, other online pharmacies is that if someone has a question for the pharmacist, they can come straight through to us. If they have a question for a doctor, we also have this wonderful feature which the NHS don't have, where we can email people directly from their accounts, and the doctor, the pharmacist and the patient have access to it. So you can actually have a chat with the doctor through your account.
So it sounds, if I might summarise, then as though we do in fact build up quite a good picture of the patient, and after we've spoken to them and communicated through emails and got their notes and perhaps scans and so on, that we have a pretty good situation where we're able to prescribe safely, which is where we started off with the conversation. So thank you very much indeed. I appreciate your time, and hopefully this will explain to everybody why it's important that we go through this procedure.